Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zeph Capo. I'm a former middle school science teacher and the proud president of the Houston Federation of Teachers. I'd first like to welcome everyone to Houston, home of the Independent School District, which is the 7th largest school district in the United States and the largest district in Texas. Each day, AFT members educate, support, mentor, transport, provide nutritious meals for over 215,000 students in this district. We're also joined in the room by many members of our sister locals from the Houston metro area. And if I could ask the presidents of our sister locals to please rise and be recognized. We are so happy that you're here with us because we need to make sure the public and all candidates running for the president of the United States understand the work we do and the challenges we face in providing the best education for all students in our public schools. We are pleased to be chosen as a site for the AFT Votes Town Hall. And I would like to thank AFT President Randi Weingarten for making sure our members are part of the conversation. Thank you, Randi. I'm sure they'll get introductions from Randy and others as well, but I would be remiss as the president of the local without recognizing my two favorite congresswomen just to the right of me, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from the 18th Congressional District and Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia. We are thrilled that the former Vice President is here with us today, and we're equally honored to have Dr. Biden joining us too. Dr. Biden spent 13 years as a high school English and reading teacher. She also worked with the children with emotional disabilities in a psychiatric hospital. If you're looking for someone who walks the walk, often in heels, look no further than Dr. Jill Biden. When Vice President Biden was elected, Dr. Biden made one thing very clear. She wouldn't give up her job as an educator. I believe very strongly that as partners, Joe and Jill's respect for each other, respect for the work that they do, and respect for the people they represent and teach inform both of them in their roles as public servants. How lucky we are that today we are not only joined by former Vice President, but one of our own. I am deeply honored to introduce to you the former Second Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden.
Thank you, Zeph. Hi. Good evening, I guess. Good afternoon. Anyway, my favorite thing of everything Zeph said was one of our own. So hello, teachers. It's so nice to be with you. I know there's an English teacher over here. I can hear her yelling. So, Zeph, I love to see how you're working here in Houston and standing up for students and teachers. And thank you to Houston Federation of Teachers for hosting us here today. A few weeks ago, I was calculating my grades, and I realized one of my students had earned an A. And she's currently a teacher's aide. She's a single mom. She has a son. She's raising a son by herself. She's an older student, and she came back to school, and she's a teacher's aide. But she's coming to community college because she wants to be a teacher. And she's working incredibly hard. And honestly, her grade was like right there, right on the line. And I was doing the grades and I was doing the tallies. and I found out she got a 91, so she got her A. So, like all of you teachers in the audience, I was so excited, I called her on the phone. And I said, "You got your A, you got your A." And she was so excited, she said, "You're making me cry." And so, it's a little thing, but it meant the world to her. And it meant the world to me to just see the joy, because she had worked so hard. And I've said it so many times, and I'm sure you say it too. Teaching isn't what I do, it's who I am. And I know a lot of you feel the exact same way. And those moments when we help our students find a piece of themselves that they didn't even know they had, when we see that spark of understanding in their eyes, those moments are the ones that make it all worth it. And we give so much of ourselves, I think, to our students, yet we get so much in return. A few years ago, I had to tell my students that I would miss class for personal reasons, the next class. And my students have a lot of shining qualities, but boundaries are not one of them. So they immediately began shouting, Dr. B, where are you going?" Well, my sister was having a stem cell transplant, and she would be isolated in a hospital unit for 6 weeks. And so I tried to explain it to my class, but the words caught in my throat. And so I turned and I faced the whiteboard, and because I was trying to collect myself, so they wouldn't see how upset I was. And when I turned back around, my students were standing, and they got in a line, and they hugged me, one by one. I realized at that moment just how much I needed their kindness. Our profession, I think, is profoundly optimistic. We take the best of what humanity has to offer, lifetimes of knowledge, wisdom, art, and craft, and we hand it over to the next generation. We say to them, "Here's what we've done. Now, what will you do with it? How will you make our world better?" Through every student, every lesson, every plan that we come up with, teachers change the world. You take resources stretched paper thin, anemic budgets, and struggling families, and you find a way to create, to invent, to guide children with care and compassion. Imagine, just imagine, what you could do with more resources. And that's why we have to be the ones to lead the change. Why our leaders must listen to teachers. Why our best policies don't come from politics. They come from our classrooms. And my husband Joe knows this. After all, he taught law school for 20 years himself. He knows what it's like to spend time, lots of time, preparing for a class. And he's seen me working long into the night, just like you do, to grade papers or counsel a student. He's listened to me talk about how hard it is to teach students who are hungry. He knows how hard we fight for them, and he knows that we can't do this alone. There is nothing more critical to the future of this country than education. And there is no one that I trust more to protect us, to listen to us, to drive a culture that sees our worth, that values what we do, than Joe Biden. In Delaware, my union was the NEA, and I was a proud member for many years. But I have long admired AFT, and especially the leadership of Randi Weingarten. Randi, for more than a decade now, you have been the face of this fierce, dynamic, powerful group of teachers. You fight for us every day, so thank you. Please help me welcome to the stage Randi Weingarten. Oh, thank you for this opportunity.
So, oh my God, I feel like I'm in stereo. So I have done, so most of the jobs that I have today have been done already, which is this time I have to make sure that I introduce Elizabeth Santos. Where is Elizabeth? District 1, HISD. And I promised Zeph that I would tell you that he wanted to do this. It was just a momentary lapse. So he let me do it. So I also want to make sure, I know I said I don't have to say Sylvia's last name, but everybody backstage said, no, you have to say Sylvia's last name. So Sylvia Garcia, who is the Congresswoman from CD 29, stand up again, Sylvia, and Sheila Jackson Lee, who's the Congresswoman from CD 18, which is our host congressional district. Come on, Sheila, stand up. And we worked really hard with these two ladies. And, you know, Washington's not an easy place to be these days. And I am very grateful to both of you for being there and showing a little sunlight every now and then when the Democratic majority in the House of Representatives is there. So thank you very, very much. And you've already met, yes, we can clap for them again. And we've already, Zeph has introduced all of us and welcomed us, and I want to make sure that Louis Malfaro, the president of Texas AFT, is recognized as well. Louis. I think that's all my jobs, by the way. As soon as I get off the stage and we finish the town hall, I will tweet all those selfies. So, but I want to just say a couple of words and then introduce my friend, the former vice president. First, I want to say thank you to Dr. Biden. I said to her earlier today, and I've always admired her. I've known her for many, many years now, and one of the things that I have most admired is not just her care and compassion and her amazing ability to connect with all of us in our profession, but the fact that she still teaches. And it is something that I want to do. And I said to Dr. Biden that when I leave this job, I ain't retiring. When I leave this job, I really want to go back to teaching. I miss it so much. And thank you. I do have a couple of things before that, which is this. Every election for president comes down to hope versus fear, aspiration versus frustration. And as we sit here today, I do not know whether aspiration will win out or frustration will win out. We certainly know what happened in 16. But 2020, the stakes, remember I am a recovering social studies teacher, the stakes seem higher than any other time, at least in modern history. And it's not just a contest of what happens for or with each and every one of us. It's about the future of our democracy. It's about the future of our economy. It's about the future of our country. Will our country be the one that is big-hearted and inclusive, or will it be fearful, polarized, and divisive? And which path we take is really up to us and everyone else who votes. As a union, we fight for a better life, not just for ourselves, but our families and our communities. And we do this through a voice at work and a voice in our democracy. But now, as we stare down the barrel of the next election, we need to elect someone who actually shares our values and has the power to implement them. Not someone who claims that this is the greatest economy ever when 40% of Americans can't even manage to put $400 together in an emergency. Not one who promotes bigotry and hatred in each and every tweet. Not one who is so relentless about undermining the legacy of the last president that he would put everyone in a situation that they are one pre-existing condition away from bankruptcy. Not someone who installed Betsy DeVos as education secretary. I guess you agree with me here. Who I think we can say is the worst education secretary ever. Even worse than Rod Page. Not someone who thinks he is above the law, above the Constitution, and attempts to subvert and damage our democracy through very dangerous authoritarian tendencies. Or who, on Memorial Day, on foreign soil, supported a dangerous dictator while attacking a former Vice President of the United States. So, it feels to me that the 2020 election is an opportunity for a major course correction. It is a moment to save our democracy, to ensure we have an economy that works for all. And if we continue to care, fight, show up, build community within and outside of our union, and vote, and get everybody else we know to vote, we can change the course of history. But in order to do that, we can't do what happened in 2016, where frustration trumped aspiration. We have to build on what happened in 2018, where engagement was the watchword. Trust, building community. So that's why we're here today, because our 2020 presidential endorsement process is not just about picking a candidate. It is about ensuring the most engagement ever within our communities. And that's why we want to make sure that our members go to AFT Votes and ensure that we know what your aspirations are, but we also are bringing candidates to you so that you can ask people hard questions. And that's why we were in Lordstown with Bernie, in Youngstown with Amy, in Philadelphia with Elizabeth, in Albany with Tim Ryan, in Detroit with Kamala. But today, I get to introduce someone I've known, it feels, for a lifetime. Joe Biden, as many of you know, is one of the best friends working people have ever had in elected office. If you lost your job, if you're worried about how to make a student debt payment, you better believe that Joe Biden understands what that's like. If you're worried about how to balance life and care for an elderly parent, you better know that Joe Biden gets that. If your parent, or if you are a parent sending a kid to an after-school program so you can take night classes to finish your degree, Joe Biden walks that walk. If you're an adjunct professor putting together gigs so your health care is covered. Joe Biden gets you. He's a public servant. He's a gifted legislator. He's a foreign policy expert. He's been a vice president. He's a father, a grandfather, and a husband. He has a life lived full of compassion and resilience, understanding and gratitude. He understands people and he fights for them. And frankly, why do I know this? Because Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, was our North Star in the last administration. You all know we didn't always get along with the Obama administration positions on education. But we had a go-to guy who always listened to us, who always brought our message to the White House, to the Oval Office, and I trusted that that message would get through. That's who the former vice president is. From being a senator, first elected at 29, co-sponsoring the Employee Free Choice Act, his staunch support for the minimum wage acts, his most recent time on the picket lines at Stop and Shop. Joe Biden doesn't campaign with working people because it's politically correct. He's with us because he is us. Frankly, it's everything the current president is not. So, he doesn't back down from convictions, whether it's the Dreamers, whether it's LGBT rights, whether it's other civil rights, whether it's Title I funding, whether it's against vouchers. But you will make your own decisions about this. And so I know, as I said to you before, he has been spending a lot of time on his education policies, and you're going to hear a bit of that. But most importantly, you get to ask your own questions to decide how we manage this process. I am so honored to be able to introduce to you my friend, our friend, the friend of the middle class, Vice President Joe Biden.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. My name is Joe Biden. I'm Jill Biden's husband. You all think I'm kidding. I just want you to know I've worked hard in a lot of things, but I never worked harder than getting Jill to say yes. I had to ask her 5 times. And it was still the right decision, but the last time I asked her, I said, look, you finally got my Irish up. My pride's engaged, Congresswoman. I said, my pride's engaged. True story. And I said I'd come back from South Africa trying to see Mandela, back with Andy Young and some others who had gone down. And I came home, went to her apartment, not far from the Philadelphia airport in Wilmington. And she said, oh, Joe, come on in. I said, no, no, no. I said, you got my pride up. I said, I'm going to ask you one more time. It's okay if you say no, but I can't keep doing this. And I said, but you don't have to, all you got to do is say yes, not when, just if. And I said, will you marry me? And she went like this. Okay. And I said, thank you, God. Anyway, look, as Jill said, I could hear her speak, and the reason I like the fact that she wanted me to run for president, I know publicly she says really nice things about me, so I know it's good. Folks, look, the fact is that, you know, as I see some of the press that covers me regularly, they know I'm always quoting Irish poets, those of you who teach poetry. I quote them not because I'm Irish, because they're the best poets. But Yeats defined teaching as, he said it's about filling a pail. Not about filling a pail, it's about lighting a fire. And that's what you all do. As Jill said, you see that twinkle. You know what it is. It's that psychic remuneration, because you're not getting enough other remuneration. But it's psychic remuneration. It matters. It's an affirmation of what you do and why you do it. And folks, the fact of the matter is that I want to thank you for lighting that fire. The truth of the matter is, as I said a little earlier, at the barbecue place where I met some folks earlier, that it really does matter that you get feedback and response from your students. Everybody wants to know what they're doing matters. And I was telling Randy, I'm relatively well known in Delaware. I was there a long time. I won a lot of elections, and we'd go Christmas shopping at the mall, and by walking down, they'd say, "Hey, hey, hey," and I just automatically wave. And they said, "No, Dr. Biden, you taught me. Oh, you think I'm kidding? The firefighters are here." They said the firefighters saved our home because it got struck by lightning, and got Jill out. I was doing Meet the Press, and the firefighters, God love you, God made man, and then he made some firefighters. But they came and they got everybody out, got Jill out of the house, and even the cat and the dog, and saved the house, and so on and so forth. And the bottom line was, in the middle of the rain, while it was raining, Jill standing out there in her bathrobe. I was down in Washington, and a firefighter comes and said, "Mrs. B, how are you? You taught me. So it doesn't matter where the devil she is. Look, folks, I want to thank the IBW for loaning us the hall here today. I am, and I'm not apologetic about it, even back in the days when Delaware was a right-to-work state, I am a union guy, beginning, middle, and end. And by the way, let's get something straight here. Wall Street and bankers and hedge fund managers, good people, but they didn't build America. The middle class built America. You know who built the middle class? Labor. Labor built the middle class. And that's a fact. And so, folks, what I want to talk to you about just a little bit, because I'm anxious to hear your questions, is that, Jill has an expression she uses. She said, any country that educates us will outcompete us. And the fact of the matter is that we're in the middle of a gigantic transformation in the United States here. We're going through one of the most difficult speeches intellectually I ever had to make was I was asked at the World Economic Forum to speak on the fourth industrial revolution. And will there be a middle class? Will it be left? There's things that are changing so fundamentally. Moore's Law, and artificial intelligence, the fundamental shifts that are taking place. And what has always been the case, which kept us ahead of the curve, which made us the leading country in the world, not a joke, has been education. We're the first major industrial nation in the world to have 1 through 12 grades free. Everybody, no means says anybody got to go. It was the thing that separated us from the rest of the world at the time. Now the world is caught up, and many of them are passing us by as we sit still, not realizing we have to fundamentally adapt to what's about to take place and already taking place. 65 out of every 100 jobs today, in a study I was asked to do for the president, 65 out of every 100 jobs require something beyond a high school degree. 12 years is not enough, and we have to let you be engaged in revolutionizing how we treat elementary and secondary education, because you know better. And so the fact of the matter is that, my dad used to have an expression. He used to say, and I apologize to the press that heard me say this 1,000 times, but I'll say it 1,000 more. He used to say that a job, Joey, is about, my dad, we moved from Scranton, notwithstanding the president saying I abandoned it, to find work. I was in 3rd grade, and my dad, and when my dad did Congressman, he said that we're in a situation where every time someone would lose a job, he'd say, Joey, a job's, and I mean this sincerely, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, as Randy pointed out, an awful lot of people can't even come up with and people who have jobs and are doing well can't come up with $400 in a single month without being strapped, have to sell something or have to mortgage something. And folks, this idea that somehow we're in a position that we don't look at the dignity of work. And I think the single most important thing, and by the way, I used to drive a school bus, not a joke, when I was in law school in the summer. And the reason I did, by the way, I learned a lot. I learned a lot because you know when you drop that kid off in a rural area in Auburn, New York, you drop him off and there's no one there to greet him. There's no one there at home. I would be able to go in and talk to the guidance counselor and say, look, I just dropped Johnny or Mary off yesterday and there's nobody there. There's nobody there. You know, or, you know, I substitute taught at a school in Syracuse, New York when I was in law school to make some spending cash, some money. And, you know, but the point is that you all know how you dread we substitute teachers when we come in. But I was in an alternative school that I taught. And all the kids who got kicked out of the regular school but weren't, you know, and I learned a whole heck of a lot about how it works. And then as Jill pointed out, it was different, but I taught for over 20 years an advanced course in constitutional law. And it made me realize that how much preparation it takes. And I wrote the manuscript. They worked out of the book that I wrote. And not a joke. Every single solitary Friday or Saturday morning, it was Saturdays I taught it so I'd have no conflict, between 9 and 12, every single solitary class I taught, I spent 3 hours in preparation. And grading those, I'm an easier grader than Jill. You all think I'm kidding, I'm not. But you know, grading those papers and spending the time, and I don't know how many hours. I never had a class that went less than 5 hours. It was a 3-hour class. People would stay because they had problems. How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to get this done? I'm having this trouble at home. I need, and no, and that was in a law school. That wasn't in a high school. That wasn't in a high school. And so the fact of the matter is, folks, that I don't think people fully appreciate the circumstance that many of you find yourselves in. And look, one of the things you all know better than I do, because you do it every single day, there's an overwhelming need for wraparound support for you. Everybody comes in and they think about today. You're expected to be a social worker. You're expected to be a counselor. You're expected to have some background in psychiatry or psychology because of the mental health problems that exist today. You're expected to be the person who is the person of last resort. Not a joke. Not a joke. Jill teaches a class, and her average age of her students is closer to 28 now that she teaches at Northern Virginia Community College. A lot of women who had busted their neck just getting through school, didn't want to go back to high school, but now they're coming back. And they're reading the essays. She never tells me the names, but read the essays that they write about their background. Some victims of rape and abuse. Some were a number from Africa and from Latin America who came and they were victims of all kinds of things. Child soldiers, a whole range of things. And they're back in school because they desperately, desperately want a shot. And so you're all expected to do so many things that no matter, you'd have to spend 15 years in graduate school to be able to work it out. And so one of the things I think is essential, we need more nurses, psychologists, access to psychiatrists, social workers. And it has to start even before preschool. There's a lot to say. I'm just going to say a few more words before. And by the way, Jill has to be on Trevor Noah tonight. She teaches his book. And she just wrote a book, so she's flying to New York to catch a flight, and he asked her to be on his show to ask an interview about her book. But the truth of the matter is, I got a feeling it's going to be about Trevor Noah's book, which is good. But my point is, that's why she left. But here's the deal, guys. You know, one of the things that I think is really, really important is that everybody's going to tell you how much they value education. Well, I got an expression I use. Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you value. Show me your budget, and I will tell you. and tell me how you are going to acquire that budget. Not generically. We can all stand up and say, I don't know any of our Republican friends that don't value education as they're voting to cut it in the United States Congress or cut it in the administration. But here's the deal. One of the things that I think you have a right to demand of us is how are we going to pay for the things we say we're going to do. Now, what I'm going to do is very quickly lay out the 4 or 5 pieces of the plan that I have and then get into questions with all of you, if I may. One is that I think that we have to not only increase but triple, and we can afford to do it, I can tell you how, from $15 billion a year to $45 billion a year, Title I. And it will allow you, and within that requires the 3 things they have to do first, including making sure you have a wage increase, making sure that it takes care of you being competitive. Look, you all went out and went to college, you spent 4 years, you ended up with a debt, most of you, if not all of you, and you end up in a situation where you in fact are making 25% less than most college graduates. And it's just not right. And so look, how do we increase the dignity of work? How do we increase the professionalization of how you're treated unless we pay you what you are remotely entitled to? And so there's means by which we can do, I'll go into it in detail if you want, in the Title I funding. Secondly, I think it is really important that we provide greater opportunity for teachers to advance and learn and be paid while they're doing it. And that's another $1 billion a year. By the way, well, I'll go into the funding later, but $1 billion a year to allow you to be paid for serious mentoring programs or heading up a department and being the leader of the math department, even though you don't technically have a separate title. There's a number of ways you should be able to make additional funding, additional money doing the work. And let me ask you a question. How many of you know a teacher has a second job just to get by? How many of you know somebody has a third job just to get by? That's bizarre. That's ridiculous. And so, folks, the third thing that I think it's important we have to do, we have to expand community schools. And we can, and the proposal I have is the $32 million a year to be able to do that. We can go into some detail on that later. And also, you know, we have to hire psychologists, counselors, social workers, nurses. And that requires, in my calculation, a minimum of $2.5 billion a year to be able to do that, because you can't do it all yourself. And the other thing that I think is important that we have to do is we need to start pre-K. And by that I mean, we know, by the way, the interesting thing is, does this microphone work here? The interesting thing is we know that the fact is that there's no debate about what needs to be done and what needs. There used to be a lot of debate about whether or not a child starting off in kindergarten or first grade is behind the 8 ball, because they've heard, depending on the study, 3 to 60 million fewer words spoken by the time they get there. It matters. It matters. There is no debate among the psychiatrists, psychologists, and the experts, left, right, or center about that. There's no debate about the fact that I was a single parent for 5 years. And I had a family to help me. And I was a U.S. Senator. But I want to tell you something. It wasn't easy. It was not easy. And it was easier for me than 90% of the other single parents in America. It gave me an appreciation I never fully understood. As a matter of fact, Randy, the second time I ran, I missed 12% of the votes. I was like the 30th, I ranked number 61 in votes cast. Never missed a vote that mattered. When I ran the second time, and they ran against me for missing votes, because I had now a million bosses in Delaware, I didn't have any one boss. I could do what you can't do. But I stood before all the experts said, we're going to do this great advertising. I said, no, just put a camera on me. And they ran a program. I said, look, I missed the following votes. Never missed one that made a difference in the outcome. But I want to tell you now, if you re-elect me and there's a parent-teachers meeting, I'm going to the meeting rather than make an unimportant vote. If there's a circumstance where my son or daughter is in a position where they, in fact, have a game that I think is important to go, I'm going to go, and so on. And I got elected by the largest margin I ever did, because I had the benefit of being able to do that in fact, people who have a direct employer don't have. But my point is, even with that, it was really, really a difficult thing to do. The last piece of all this is, it seems to me that we have to change the way in which we think about early education. And by that I mean sending social workers into homes where there are people who are hanging on the edge, getting them the kind of help they need, getting the kind of psychiatric help. You know, this generation, the so-called, this new generation, 15 to 20 years old, they have the highest. I spoke to the National Association of Psychiatrists and then the International Association in London. And the point is, they point out that it has the highest degree of anxiety of any cadre of people in the United States of America. These kids, ever. You're exactly right. And what are we doing about it? It's within our power to do this. This is within our wheelhouse, not beyond our capacity. I've already, if Jill were here, she'd give me the hook. I've already spoken too much. Why don't I take your questions?
I told you he knew what he was talking about. All right, why don't we do this? I have a couple questions from the internet, which I'm going to use at the end. We have a hard stop. I'm not going to tell you when it is, but why don't we just do...
Tell me so I can show it. And what I can't answer, the Congresswoman will answer for me.
All right, so why don't we raise hands? I promised this young lady that she was going to have one of the questions. Would you like to start? Would you tell the Vice President your name? And her teacher has said that she could use the question instead of her teacher.
Hi.
My name is Vivi Villalobos, and I wanted to ask
Is that
Is
mic
the mic
on?
on? Yes, now it is.
Pitbull the
Wait,
singer
tell us your name again, sweetheart.
Birmania Villalobos. You can call me Vivi.
Okay, everybody,
Vivi.
you can call her
Vivi.
Vivi.
Pitbull the singer always says, "We are the United States of America, not the divided states of America." I bring this up because Texas has many ethnic groups living here. What do you intend to do to project a message of unity because of current message we are receiving in dividing people and the students of schools?
You are very good. How old are you? 10. She's 10 years old. When I was your age, kiddo, at 10 years old, I stuttered so badly I could hardly... No, I really did. Everybody can still laugh about stuttering. If I said I had a cleft palate or a club foot, no one would have laughed. But stuttering is the only thing people can still laugh at. And it's incredibly debilitating because you walk in and you say, you know, would you like to go to the prom with me? You know, it sounds silly, but go see the King's Speech and you'll understand it better. But the point is, even if I didn't, I wouldn't have had the courage to stand up in front of all these people and do what you just did. So you got to make me a promise. When you're President of the United States, you'll remember who I was, okay? All right, let me answer the question. Look, I said the reason why, and I'll be as brief as I can, I said the reason why I was running, I had 3 reasons, and I announced it after when I decided to finally do it. My grandkids came to me and said, "Pop, you got to go ahead and do this," because we knew it was not going to be a pretty campaign, especially the general election, if I made it. And they said, "We understand, Pops, you got to do it," because here's the deal. Charlottesville. I never, ever, ever thought coming out of getting involved in the first instance because of civil rights and civil liberties, I never thought I'd see people coming out of fields carrying torches, literally carrying torches, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile that was chanted at the time that Hitler was taking over Germany in the 30s. Not a joke, same bile. Accompanied by white supremacists in the Ku Klux Klan. And then when asked by and met by decent, honorable people who were opposing the hate and said, "Not here in our city," and a clash ensued and a young woman lost her life. And when he was asked, "What about it?" he said there were some very fine people on both sides. Now look, it's not just the president. Our children are listening. They're listening. Not a joke. Not a joke. Hate crimes are way up. We've empowered people come out from under rocks that never existed before. Here's what the Constitution says, and I remind everybody of this. The Constitution, as well as the Declaration of Independence, they use the word we the people. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator. We've never met that requirement before, but we've never walked away from it. Never one single time. It's happened. And now the Breitbarts and the hard right and the rest of these folks out there, they're legitimizing by their actions the kinds of things that are happening. You saw what happened to the synagogue. Anyway, I won't go into it all, but the bottom line is this. I think the worst thing that happened to the United States of America of late is this division, villainizing and talking down other people. The idea that all Mexicans are, the idea that, and I could go on and on and on. I think we need an immigration policy that is who we are. Who we are the United States of America. No, it sounds corny, but here's the deal. Look, think about this. All of you, except if you were ancestors of someone coming over on a slave ship, the original sin of America. If, other than that, everybody got here because the reason we're the nation we are is we were able to cherry pick the best of every single culture. When my great-grandfather, great-grandfather Owen Finnegan got on a coffin ship in the Irish Sea, had no idea he was going to make it, it took courage, it took optimism, it took determination, it took resilience. When somebody's down in Guadalajara sitting around a hand-hewn table and he says to his kids and his wife, let's sell everything we have, give it to a coyote, they'll take us across the border, drop us in the desert where we don't want to be, in a country where we don't speak the language, won't that be fun? No, I'm serious. Think about what it takes. Think about what it takes. So we got to fundamentally alter our immigration policy. And we got to just look. The Dreamers have already adopted the American dream. They are Americans. They already are Americans. But I tell you what, honey, what I'm going to do, if you give me an address, I'm going to write you a longer answer and tell you the exact things I would do. Okay? Okay? Promise? I'll bet you're as bright as you're good looking. I tell you what. What's your favorite subject? Journalism. Whoa. Whoa, I better be more circumspect in my answers. Those guys back there. Look, come here. Come here. Go ahead, the next question.
I love it. Okay, over here.
This? Washington Post, New York Times, all these guys. You ought to go back and talk to them, okay? All right? And by the way, that's one of the things that's a dangerous idea. You know, as these guys will tell you, I'm not always their favorite subject. But the truth of the matter is, the reason we are who we are is called a free press. Continuing to denigrate it is dangerous. That's the guy you want to talk to, okay? A letter underneath. Somebody take her back to meet the press.
I love it.
Sorry.
You're going to get an internship from the Washington Post, from the New York Times.
And if that doesn't work, come work for me.
MSNBC. Okay, this gentleman over here. Tell us your name and school or whatever if you want to.
Clayton Settle. My wife's a teacher at George Ranch High School. My question, Mr. Vice President, if you become president and you have a Democratic House and a Republican Senate, what part of your agenda do you think could become law?
Well, by the way, I think the bulk of it can become law. Let me tell you why. And I'm not being I'm not being Pollyannish about this. Even the press, although they tell me everything has changed, I refuse to believe everything's changed. Human nature is human nature is human nature. God had made a new brand of man in the millennia. And here's the deal. Here's the deal. Not a joke. The truth of the matter is, the vast majority of Republicans, a significant minority of Republicans, that's all I need, in the House and the Senate, understand that this tax cut was passed, creating another $2 trillion in debt, and increasing the number of exemptions in the law. There are now over $1.6 trillion in what are called tax exemptions. Some people call them loopholes. Some are justified. It makes sense to give a person a tax break if, in fact, they were to give a charitable contribution. But if you give a charitable contribution, they turn me off. I don't blame them. I must have.
There it goes.
They must have gotten the tax break. Okay. Anyway, but here's the deal. All kidding aside, if you and just I'll give you one of 50 examples. Oh, not 50. About 22 examples I could give you. If in fact, when you make a charitable contribution to the Boys Club, Girls Club, the Cancer Foundation, whatever, based on your income, you're probably only going to be able to deduct somewhere between 22 and 24% of that. Now, if somebody making a lot of money at the top bracket, in fact, makes that same contribution, same amount of money, they get to deduct from their taxes a total of up to, now it's going to be changed back to 36, but 39 or 36%. Same contribution. I mean, not the same but the same instant. If you limited the amount you could deduct to 28%, hurting nobody, punishing nobody, you'd raise over $400 billion. Okay? So we don't have to go out and punish people. To send I believe we should have free community college for every single person qualified in America. And by the way, it costs a lot of money. It costs $6 billion a year. There goes that big spending Joe Biden, right? There he goes again. But guess what? It would increase the GDP by 0.2% a year. It would, in fact, cut in half, there's other ways to do it, cut in half the cost of 4 years of college, because almost every single state, they're transferable credits to the state universities. And guess what? All you had to do is eliminate one single exemption. It's called stepped up basis. I didn't know what it was because for years and years, no longer because I wrote a book, but I was listed as the poorest man in Congress. And, you know, when I did my financial disclosure as vice president, somebody wrote, it's probable no man has ever assumed the office of vice president with fewer assets than Joe Biden. I assume they weren't speaking intellectual access. But here's the deal. And by the way, I'm fine. I did very well compared to the rest of America. But here's the deal. The deal is that I didn't know what stepped up basis meant. It means if you go out and make an investment, make a capital gain. You buy something, you buy stock at $1, it goes to $2. You buy it $1 million, it goes to $1.5 million. When you cash that in to take the gain you made, you have to pay a capital gains tax, which I believe is much too low. We should be rewarding work, not just wealth, is the way we do this. But at any rate, and so what happens? If God forbid, on the way to sell, you got hit by a truck and you passed on, and you left it to your son or daughter, they pay no tax. A tax that was owed 10 seconds earlier. That tax out of $1.6 billion comes up to $17 million. That's the total of it. Eliminate that one tax, punishing nobody, not going to change anybody's standard of living. It's fair. I think the vast majority of wealthy people will agree with it because they know it. Guess what? You can put every single solitary kid in community college for free, and you could reduce the deficit by $11 billion if you want to do it. But so my generic point is that there's a lot we can do by just making sure we make that, and that's the reason I think the Republicans are going to, in fact, change their, not Republicans, enough Republicans with enough Democrats being reelected are going to, in fact, join in doing what they know in their gut is the right thing. Because guess what? I and a lot of other people are talking like the devil about it, and there's going to be enormous pressure on them. What do? You want to make sure that person gets another tax break for X amount of dollars when I can put every single solitary kid in school who qualifies for community college? It's about what we did in 2018. I went into 67, 68 races. As my friends in the Congress can tell you, the 41 people who beat Republicans were all mainstream Democrats, the mainstream and civil rights, civil liberties and all that. But guess what? They went in and they made a logical case and they won. Last point, everybody said that, you know, the Affordable Care Act is a disaster. Nothing's going to work. And one of the things that Barack, the president, I say Barack, he's my close personal friend, but I say it as to distinguish you from the president. I don't want to say president, get confused here with that other guy. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. Because I say the president, they go, oh, God. Anyway, here's the deal. The fact of the matter is that he didn't even have time to explain how important that was. He didn't have time because there was everything landed on his desk but locusts. And so he was working on everything. But guess what? Once they took it away, what happened? Have you found any Republican who wasn't for pre-existing conditions being covered? Have you found any Republican who wasn't for making sure that your kid could stay in your policy till age 26? Have you found any Republican who didn't think you should be in a position where you no longer have insurance after you spend X amount of dollars? All of a sudden they saw, as they say, where I come from in Southern Delaware, not where I come from, my state, they had an altar call. They saw the Lord. And that's right.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Mr. Vice President, my name is Elizabeth Diekman, and I retired last year from Aldine ISD as a special education teacher.
God love you. No, I really mean it. And by the way, what I didn't mention, IDA, we're going to increase significantly. No, it's one of the programs.
I hope so.
No, real. But go ahead.
But that's a whole different story. When I retired with my teacher's retirement benefits, but I also worked for many years in the public, and I paid into Social Security for years and years and years. And because I retired, I'm not entitled to my full benefits of Social Security. I paid in the money. I feel like I should have it back.
You should. Okay?
Well, there's this windfall act that prevents that.
Yeah, and I think it's a mistake. I think it's wrong. And look, when you have to, for example, we retire or we get forcibly retired, depending on where our situation is, from the Congress, we get the pension we paid into, and we get Social Security. You should get the same thing.
And there are about 10 states. There are about 10 states and Puerto Rico where that happens.
Yes.
And that's a very big deal, particularly in a state like Texas.
I can see it's a big deal.
I know because I was told beforehand that there are a bunch of people who have questions about charter schools, and there's a bunch of people who have questions about student loans. Am I right about this? So I just want, of the people who have questions about charter schools, I just want to see the hands so that I can actually call on one of you. And so why don't I call on this lady? Then I'll also do the same about, and then I'll also do the same about student loans. And then I'm also going to make sure we do this. Any question that's not answered, because I see now a lot of hands are up, any question that's not answered, there are 3x5 cards. The Vice President has said that he will make sure we answer all those questions.
I want to hear your questions.
So I want to make sure that if we can't finish all the questions, which we will not be able to do because we have a hard stop at 6:10. They've already extended because of all the time that we were all chatting. So I want to see the question about charters and then student loans, and then if we have more time, we'll do more.
Hello, my name is Marie-Sandra LeBlanc, former President Joe Biden. Year after year, research shows that charter schools lead to more segregation and leave students with needs out behind. Yet, unregulated for-profit charter schools continue to pull money out of our public schools for needing staffing and services for students. What is your plan to stop the growth of unregulated for-profit charter schools?
To stop them. I don't support it. And by the way, as I think Randy will tell you, I was in part of that conversation.
Sorry, I've been walking around.
No. I do not support any federal money, private money, for-profit charter schools, period. And number two, there are what we started off initially talking about magnet schools, but now we call charter schools. There are some charter schools that work, but the truth of the matter is that I don't think any charter school system that does not allow for total enrollment based upon the fact that where you live, your access, whether it's a lottery or not, should be in a position where they make those kind of choices. So, because the bottom line is it siphons off money for our public schools, which are already in enough trouble, as well as it siphons off other assets as well. I can give you a longer answer, but I'm going to get in trouble.
Thank you. Okay. A question on student loans. I just want to make sure, since that's what I was asked before, but if not, okay, right back here, and then we'll go back to this side. I saw that lady. This lady over here has had her hand up for a long time. So that side over here, student loan question. I get a lot of exercise this way. Thank you. I'm getting all my steps in.
Hello, my name is Nicole Jackson. I work at Madden Elementary in Richmond, Texas. My question is about student loan interest. My husband and I have over $100,000 in student loans between us, and we're both teachers. And we have acquired probably over $7,000 in interest alone. If we are supposed to be paying our student loans back, how can we get relief from just the interest alone?
Well, by the way, as you know, we try to do, and the answer is if you're teaching, you should be able to have your student loan basically paid off. Now, but here's the thing, the existing program, the existing law is much too difficult. Too many hurdles that have to be gone through, too many hurdles. I think it can be simplified, and again, if you give me your name, I will get to you specifically, but it can be simplified significantly, and so that you qualify if you're teaching in school to be able to not have to pay that loan. And the years that you're working, you don't pay the loan and it gets reduced up to a certain amount. The point is that secondly, it is the student loan that most people are defaulting, if my memory serves me correctly, are people whose student loan is in the range of $18,000 to $20,000. And we should be able to do a great deal there as well. But the student loan program is, we ended the for-profit piece of this a long time ago. And now we're in a position where the question is, how far back do you go? I'd like to go back pretty far because I had my deceased son went to Penn and then he went to Syracuse Law, and he graduated with $120,000 in student loans after my borrowing everything I was able to borrow against my house, etc., as much as I could do. My other son went to Georgetown and then Yale Law School. He, in fact, had $140,000 in terms of his. Here's the deal. When you, in fact, anyway, the point is that I think there has to be a means by which you get to total debt forgiveness and delay in terms of what you have to do in terms of the service you're rendering to the country. And the service you're rendering to the country here is teaching qualifies as one of those things, but it's much too onerous the way the traps you got to run through to get it. But I'm happy to talk to you more about that, but anyway, it's a big problem.
Mr. Vice President, just so you know, and just so you know, the AFT has sued Navient because of all the misrepresentations. We have all these debt clinics, and we should make sure we have one in the Houston area. And we just have actually worked on and found a new tool that even with a broken system, we will be able to help people.
Yes.
And we are in the midst of making sure that 100,000 of our members can get access to this new tool so that hopefully, let's make sure between the Houston area and AFT Texas, we get that information available to you now. We need the new plans that the Vice President is talking about.
But I agree
but at
with you,
least
Mandy.
you have this right now.
And by the way, she's not in the midst of it, she's leading it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
She's afraid to give you that, huh?
She's not giving you that microphone.
My name is Michelle Williams, and I work about 10 minutes from here at Cashmere Gardens Elementary, which is one of the underprivileged schools here in Houston ISD. And one of the issues we have at our school is that our students do not have access to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So if you were to become President of the United States, how would your administration address the inequities in the access of the STEM fields to students like mine?
The way you do it, and the significant increase in Title I, that's one of the 3 requirements at the front end they have to meet besides teacher salaries. And that is making available to every one of the schools that qualify under, as you know, it's about 45% of the schools in the country, yours qualifies under Title I, that they offer the courses that are needed and provide the personnel to be able to teach those courses. But again, it is part of what has to happen. Because here's the thing that bothers me a lot. And I guess I'm ending with this, I don't know. But here's what bothers me a lot. You know, even our, how can I say it, more enlightened friends have, I think, a very, not a very healthy view of the capacity of all of our children. For example, when we went to Detroit, the president asked me to lead the effort to get Detroit out of bankruptcy and allowed me to pick people from other departments to do it. They got a great mayor there named Duggan who came back in. He's a really
great guy.
Great guy. And we found all the resources that allowed everything from high-speed rail, because they got good hospitals there, the downtowns, eliminating the neighborhoods that collapsed and clearing the neighborhoods so there weren't drug houses, and a whole lot of things. But in the process, a whole lot of people got, in fact, left the city, black and white. They left the city. And so when it finally came out of bankruptcy, we found something silly. It's going to sound, not to you all, but to many people. We found out that no one knew how to turn on the streetlights. No, not a joke. Because they're run by sophisticated computers and programming. They didn't know how to make the water system function like it was supposed to. They didn't know how to deal with all the infrastructure needs that had become so much more complicated. So I remember we went out to get an outfit called IT International to commend the very people. If you ran a company and you said, I need more IT people, you'd go to them and they'd send people to you. They went into the communities and they went into the tough neighborhoods that were left. And what they did was they found, I think it was 54 women, not by design. Coincidentally, they were all African American, save possibly one. They ranged in age from 24 to 52 or 3. And they, in fact, no one had more than a high school degree, and about a third had a GED. We set them up with a community college where they took, I think it was a 16-week program, learning how to code and to work the computers. And everybody said, when I remember going in and making this case what I was going to do, and a lot of people, not in the administration, but a lot of people in Congress were very progressive and liberal, and a lot of people, I said, I don't know, Joe, man, I mean, how are you going to make that work? Well, let me tell you something. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when given a chance. I went out to the graduation, not a joke, went out to the graduation. Every single one of those women had a job. Average salary, press, let me check the exact numbers, so don't quote me, say I misquoted. Somewhere, I think it was $53,000 or $54,000 on average. Lowest paying job started, I think it was 48, and one as high as 102,000. Not one single solitary one of those women had more than a high school degree. And a lot of them left high school. Look, you all know how hard it is to go back. The people you teach, it takes a lot of nerve to go back. It takes a lot of courage to go back. So my point is we vastly underestimate the capacity of ordinary people to do in tough neighborhoods STEM, to be able to be the next scientist. Instead of looking at the kid in a hoodie walking the street as somehow he's a gangbanger, that may be the next Nobel Prize winner in mathematics. No, I'm not, for real. So we got to think that way. And that's why under the Title I proposal I have, we'll go into detail with you about it, you have to invest in those schools and you have to invest that capacity to be able to do advanced work. Okay?
So we are running out of time, which means, but I love that there are so many hands up, which is the 3x5 cars are in back of the room. I'll get some so people will have them. I'm going to call on this gentleman because I saw him. And if we have time before that, I'll call on one of the internet questions from Montana. But this gentleman, your name. No, that gentleman who's standing
That's
up.
President Trump calling me.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Norris Thomas. I work at Harper Alternative School as a classroom teaching assistant, where it assists with the education of special needs students, along with custodians, bus drivers, support staff. So my question is, and a majority of them have multiple jobs, and during the summer, a lot of them don't have pay. So my question is, if elected, what would you do to make sure that school paraprofessionals and support personnel don't fall further behind in pay and treated with dignity and respect.
Make sure they're recognized and paid for what they're worth. Again, most of the cases you're talking about are cases where our schools that qualify for Title I. And in those, you have to take care of the same people. It's not just the teacher, not just the teacher. It's not just, by the way, it goes to the I was going to say paralegal, paraprofessionals. It goes across the board, including to everyone who works for the system. And because, look, it is, it's a family deal. You can't do it with just teachers alone. And you got to get it, so that's why we need to get significantly more help in those classrooms for you as well in dealing with other problems that exist, beyond making sure that you're paid a reasonable salary, much more than they're being paid now, in order to be able to do the job they do. Because look at it another way. It's what I said a long time ago. I happened to speak to the National Convention of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Okay, we're still in their hall. And I said, everybody says you guys make too much or bargain for too much, et cetera. I said, I wonder what would happen if every single solitary electrician in America decided to take a day off. The country would collapse. No, collapse. Collapse. Because everything from the internet to the underwater, anyway. So what happens? What happens? It's the same way you have to look at the value of the people within the school system. Everybody is in on the deal, and you got to be in on the deal. And that's why we talked about community schools and wraparounds before. There's a number of ways in which you can get a lot. At lunch we talked about it. We can do a lot by bringing in outside people who want to be engaged. Companies, philanthropies, people who in fact run the mental health hospitals, or people who are engaged in a whole range of activities that affect the ability of a student and a teacher to be able to have success with a student. And so the point is that you need help on the outside, but you also need to make sure the people inside are there now get paid. And we're able to do that through the Title I provision, as well as the provisions we have for the for community schools and the $450 million bucks and the rest. Anyway.
So I promised the Vice President's staff a hard stop at 6:10. And so I have to keep my promises, but I want to say this. There are lots of questions around.
Can we do one more?
Like, yeah. There's lots of questions. We have a opioid epidemic question from the internet, from Montana. We have other healthcare questions from here. And so if you want to do one more, I can do one more. Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, staff. I promise. I know I'm supposed to go.
Thank you, Mr.
I love a guy who breaks the rules.
My staff doesn't.
My name is Andrea Gonzalez, and I'm a 7th grade math teacher with Aldine ISD. And my concern is with healthcare. I pay a significant amount, like for the premiums, and our deductibles are extremely high. And so I understand that, I'm for coverage for everyone. I think everyone should be covered. However, if the healthcare is so expensive and the costs are so high, then how is that going to, what good is coverage if we can't afford to pay when we go to the doctor or if we get sick?
Two things. One, I think that, first of all, I don't believe in jettisoning the Affordable Care Act. I think we build off of it, and we can build significantly off of it, and we can do a whole lot of things that we had intended to do had things been a little bit different. Number one. Number two, I think that everyone, whether you have private insurance, whether you pay for your own insurance or employer-based insurance, or whether you have no insurance at all, everyone should be able to buy into a Medicare-like option. Everyone should be able to do that. And the way that would work would be that you'd be able to be covered if, in fact, you thought your premiums were too high. That requires us to up the amount of subsidy we have in the Affordable Care Act and up the amount of subsidy we have in other things. But I think it's the most rational way to get to virtually 100% of the people with affordable care. Affordable care. And so, but again, I can lay out the whole health care plan I have for you, but I think you have to be in a position that you can, in fact, have the coverage you need and you want and you can afford, and it is affordable.
So can we actually say, first off, remember, 3x5 cards back there. This is, Mr. Vice President, this is what happens when you start with teachers and paraprofessionals and bus drivers. One question begets another, begets another, begets another. But as I said, the Vice President has said he will make sure he answers every question. And I saw it earlier, before he says anything, I saw it earlier today when we were with students and we were with teachers from Navarro and from the North Houston Early College Program. We couldn't get out of there. And we were going to walk through schools, but there were finals. And the Vice President said, I'm not disrupting finals and things like that. That is a teacher's instinct. But I want to say, this is someone who's seen everything. And I want to say that on behalf of myself and the AFT and this amazing group of people from Texas, I told the Vice President before how little rights people have in Texas if they are school teachers or school workers, and how we need to make sure that everyone in this country has not only the right to the union, but has a right to the power of collective bargaining and to do the kind of things that you were talking about. This is a man who walks that walk and who understands it. And I want to just say, on behalf of all of us, thank you for taking our questions and thank you for your time.
Let me make one closing comment. What I'd like to be able to do, whether you do it in another fora like this or after, I would like to be able to sit with you for real and ask you questions. No, I sincerely mean that, because you're entitled to know what I think and what I think we should do. But what I know when I was in not the same situation, but my wife in the situation, I know that we don't ask you enough. You know better than most of us. You're in it every day. You see it, you touch it, you taste it, you know. And I want to know what's on your mind. I really mean it. I give you my word, I mean it. And so I hope you'll write down your questions or what you think is the most 1, 2, 3 most critical things we have to do in order to make it possible. Whether you are driving a bus, you're a school nurse, you are a school psychologist, you're a teacher, you're a para-teacher, whatever the circumstance is. What is it that you think is important? What is it you think is important? And don't be surprised if I get back to you with a question. Because I'm serious, the only way I've found, the only way you learn, people in our situation, we don't do it as much anymore. When I sat in the Senate, I would do town meetings all the time, covering my state. It's what I learned the most from, letting people tell me what was on their mind. And I really strongly encourage you to do that. I know it's a pain in the neck. It's like asking you to fill out an exam, or something. But if you let me know what's on your mind, it would really, and I will not expect their answers, but if I'll actually share it with the congresswomen that are here to let them know what I'm being asked. And I promise I will try to get in a timely way to all of you and what it is. And with regard to the opioid crisis, what we're doing now is criminal. What's happening now, the drug companies ought to be held accountable. The idea that we are not spending more money on pure research to find other ways to kill pain that are not addictive. The fact that we don't announce on all these opioid commercials that are on television about that it is addictive. It can take up to as little as 4 to 5 days to be addicted. When's the last time you went and had a root canal and they gave you a prescription for an opioid? Or, I mean, it is just wrong what we're doing. And there's a lot of other things we can do as well with regard to the crisis. But the last thing we should be doing is putting people in jail. We should be making sure we put them in a circumstance where they get help, And that costs money, but it'll also save billions of dollars over time for us. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. Thanks.